What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Cocktails in the War Room, episode number 144. I am your host, Mistress Carrie. Every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern, we gather here in my war room to talk about whatever's going on. Talk about the news if we feel like talking about something depressing, to talk about music, charity stuff, to catch up with each other. And this is how we've been riding out COVID-19, but it's not something that when COVID is gone that is going to go away, because the War Room has become a family, as the people call themselves that have been joining me during the War Room. And yes, 144 episodes. We did 80 episodes, 80 nights in a row. And then last summer, we started doing Cocktails in the War Room every week. And that is what we are continuing. So I want to put a warm welcome out, not only to all of the members of the War Room family that have been here all the time, but if you are new to Cocktails in the War Room, whether you listen to the Mistress Carrie podcast, or maybe you listen to the Mistress Carrie radio show, let us know if this is your first time in the War Room so we can welcome you properly. Now, I will tell you that there are a couple things you need to know about the War Room. First of all, you need to know about the pug cam. Wednesday, come here. Hey, what are you doing? Do you want to come over here and have a cookie with me so you can? Do you want to say, "Good girl"? Can I have your paw? Good girl. Other one. I want the other one. Thank you. Can you get down for me? Down. Good girl. So for anybody that's new to the War Room, this is my co-host. She is my partner in crime, my confidant. She has been here with me almost every episode. She's been in the house for every episode. There have only been a couple that she has not been able to come to, including the party for episode 100. But every once in a while, this little nugget, the midget dog, she's got about 17 different nicknames. But every once in a while, she cops an attitude and decides not to make an appearance on the show. That is not happening tonight, because here she is. Am I boring you? Am I boring you? No? Okay. Can I rub your belly? Can I rub your belly? Oh. Wednesday's who I have been locked up with during COVID, and she's my bestest pal. And she blows snots on me sometimes. Sometimes she shows us the pug hole on the show, which nobody really wants to see. And she's the most spoiled dog in the world. So Wednesday, everybody says hello. Welcome, Carol. Is it Carlo? Oh, Carlo, what's going on? Welcome to the War Room. Everybody giving Carlos some love. We appreciate you joining us. We got a lot to talk about tonight. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Carlo, if you want to get caught up with all of the terms we use here in the War Room, all the inside jokes, you can go to mistresscarrie.com. The very first blog post in my blog section of mistresscarrie.com is something called the dictionary. Here, you want a cookie? There you go. And in that dictionary is all the terms that we use here in the War Room and all of the inside jokes that have come up through the 144 episodes, because we don't want you to be left out. So Wednesday, sit down. Good girl. Do you want to come up and say hi to everyone? Do you want to come say hi? Come here. Come say hi. Make some pug noises. No? You want to get down? Okay. You just want the cookies. You're so spoiled. Back up so everybody can see you at least. Back up. Sit down. Good girl. Good girl. Wednesday's best friend, Zero, is here, so she gets part of a cookie, too. Here you go, Zero. Good girl. There you go, Wednesday. That's it. That's all of the cookies. That's all of them. Okay, let's see. All right, so that's Wednesday. And now that all of the cookies are gone, she's going to leave us because that's what she does. So we have a lot to talk about. The first thing I want to talk to you guys about is my trip. So if you weren't here last week, we left here last Tuesday night, and I was getting ready to go to Nashville for a couple podcast conventions, which I went to and made it back by the skin of my teeth on Saturday night. Actually, before I tell you about Nashville, we're trying the new cocktail tonight. So last week in the mail call, I got sent these PBR hard coffee. Can you see that? Yeah. And they weren't cold. These have been on ice. I want to try them. Everybody told me I was going to love them. Oh. They're chocolatey coffee. The PBR hard coffee. I will always tell you when it's a sponsor. This is not a sponsor. This was a gift. Oh, this is Sunday morning football tailgate or like really bad hangover. Now, I brought a glass of ice because I wasn't sure if I was going to like them just cold or if I should. What do you have, Wednesday? What? Give me that. Hey, get away from my coffee. That's mine. Hey, you can't drink the coffee booze. Hey, get out of there. Here, want this? Boop. Boop. This is her giant clam, by the way. I know that sounded awkward and weird, but she has a giant clam. She likes to play with it. Stop it. Stop. I know you're... Stop it. It's this clam. Wednesday's giant purple clam that she likes to play with. Okay, now I got the coffee on the rocks. Oh yeah. Why didn't you guys tell me about this before? Like, where has this been the whole time? It's so good. Mark, you are 100% right. It tastes like trouble. Ryan, I love chocolate coffee. Hey, what? She's knocking the pillows off the couch now. For anybody that's new to the War Room, sometimes Wednesday does this. And then, hey. And then she knocks the pillows off the couch. Hey, move it. Hey. What? Really? I'm trying to... Are you done? Are you done? There. Sit on your clam. Mm-hmm. Are you just going to hang out and wiggle your little... Look at her butt. Look at her little tail. I mean, how am I supposed to get mad at her for anything when she just has that little wiggle? There's no more cookies. They're gone. They're gone. Can I tell them about Nashville now, please? The PBR coffee is awesome. I don't know if they could drink like 12 of them because they're like a little creamy, but they're delicious. Right? Okay. So let's talk about Nashville. So last Thursday morning, I took off and went down to Nashville. There were 2 podcast conventions going on down there. One of them was industry-wide called Podfest Movement, and it's like the biggest podcast convention in the country all year. The other one was Rockin' Pod, which was a convention of just rock podcasts. So I intended to go to both and got down to Nashville, went to the Grand Ole Opry, which was right near where the Podfest Movement convention was, over at the Gaylord Opryland Convention Center. Drove around a little bit, met up with my friend Jag, who is a podcast producer in Detroit, and kind of walked around a little bit. He and I had lunch. That was a good time. I stayed with a friend of mine who lives in East Nashville in this really funky old Victorian house, which was rumored to have like been owned by a creepy witch at one time or another, like way back when the house was built. The house was amazing. The neighborhood in East Nashville is super funky. There's a lot of older houses. They're kind of close together. Everybody has these little backyards, but the communities are really funky and people do weird things to their houses. Everybody's got these little secret gardens and stuff. Kind of had a New Orleans or Savannah vibe to it in some parts, but it was really cool. So then went out to eat in East Nashville Thursday night. Friday got up, had some record company meetings, went and had a private tour of Sienna Studios, which is where it's an old studio and it's where Neil Young recorded Harvest. And there's an echo chamber built into the basement that they use for recording weird vocal effects and stuff. I made a video that's up on my Instagram because when I found out that Neil Young recorded his record there and that they used some of the vocal effects in the echo tube, like chamber downstairs, because Mike Shue has his Neil Young podcast, Long May You Young. And so I sent him that video and put it up on Instagram. Had a chance to talk to Marty Fredrickson, who is a record producer. He is also the actual guy that sang for the band Stillwater in Almost Famous. Obviously, the actors were in the movie, but there were real musicians that actually recorded the music. And Marty Fredrickson, the record producer, is the actual vocals of the lead singer of Stillwater. So I got to talk to him about some of the music that he's working on and some of the stuff that's been going on in that studio. Everybody from The Cult to Buck Cherry. There's been so many artists that have been going through that studio. So that was really cool. Had a chance to kind of tool around Nashville a bit. And I heard that these races were going to be happening over the weekend, this Grand Prix race. They were going to block off roads and it was going to be insane. So then I went to dinner and then I went to the pre-party for Rockin' Pod where Greg Bissonette and Billy Sheehan, there were all these bands playing. It was an absolute blast. And then Saturday morning went to Rockin' Pod, the convention. It was a lot of music related stuff. There were a lot of music podcasts that were there. Ricky Rackman, the old host of Headbangers Ball, was there. Vinny and Carmine, Appice, however you want to pronounce it. They had a booth across from me. Let's see. Billy Sheehan was there. I actually interviewed him, and there's a bonus episode of the podcast coming up that's got Billy Sheehan in it. I met Pamela DeBar. Insane. I will allow me to give you guys some visual images. So here are some of the people that I met at Rockin' Pod. So there's Vinny and Carmine up there. Billy Sheehan over there in that picture. The guy with the crazy beard down in the bottom, that's John Wysocki, the original drummer from Stained. Now, I haven't seen John in probably at least 10 years. After he left the band, he was like in California. And then I heard that he was in Nashville because there are so many musicians in Nashville. But I did not expect to see him. He goes walking by my table, does a double take. I look at him. I hopped over the table and we hugged each other for like 5 minutes because we haven't seen each other in so long. And it was so cool to get caught up. And he's got a new band now in Nashville and he's been playing drums for a bunch of different people in Nashville. And it was just so random. I also met a bunch of transplanted New Englanders that are down in the Tennessee area that had come into Nashville for Rockin' Pod. And so that was really cool. People coming up going, hey, I used to listen to you when you were streaming, and I let them know where they could listen to me on the radio now. But it was just really cool to kind of sit down with all of these guys. Then they asked me to moderate a Women in Rock panel, which I did. So the ladies you see in these pictures, the blonde lady, her name is Juanita Copeland, and she's the only CEO of a recording studio in Nashville that's a female. And she was super interesting to talk to. She worked her way up at the recording studio the way that I worked my way up at WAF. She literally started as the receptionist and talked about how the business had changed. and talked about the artists that she's worked with. Like her studio is where Robert Plant recorded with Alison Krauss. And so her perspective on things was really interesting. The girl in the orange shirt, her name is Jax Hollow. And she is an up and coming rock kind of singer-songwriter. She shreds. She's got crazy attitude and super funky. And then the woman with the red hair is Pamela DeBar, who, if you don't know who she is one of the original groupies. To bring up Almost Famous again, it's rumored that Cameron Crowe based Kate Hudson's part in Almost Famous after Pamela DeBar. And Pamela is a New York Times bestselling author. She's written 5 books, the most notable called I'm With the Band. And her boyfriends, because she has a podcast on the Pantheon Podcast Network, by the way, that she calls Pamela DeBar's Slumber Party, I believe. And she talks about how the guys, the artists that she dated back in the heyday of rock and roll of her era, that it wasn't like the 80s groupie thing. She was like a band date, kind of like an Almost Famous, that she was friends with these guys. She dated Jim Morrison. She dated Jimmy Page. She dated Jimi Hendrix. She told a story. She was with Mick Jagger the night of Altamont. And she talked about how Mick Jagger was going to disband the Rolling Stones because he was so distraught over what had happened at Altamont. And she was with him that night. She ended up marrying Michael DeBar. They got divorced back in 1991. But when you hear her, she dated Keith Moon. Like when you hear her talk about the people in her life, we had dinner after the convention on Saturday night together, and she just tells stories. She's 72 years old, and she tells stories. She is as sharp as a tack and recalls literally everything. And I was like, like when I refer to Mick Jagger, I refer to him as Mick Jagger, but you call him Mick. And she's like, well, yeah, because his name is Mick. And I was like, I know, but I don't call him Mick. You call him Mick because you know him. Like hearing her talk about, we were sitting at dinner and she was talking about how all Jim Morrison ever wanted to be was to be a poet and to be known for being a poet. And she talked about how alcohol stole his words, she said at dinner. She talked about how alcohol kind of took over his life and took away his gift of writing, of his words. And it was insane. I could have sat there and listened to her talk for hours. The story this woman has, it's just unbelievable. And Heidi says, my husband says he loves listening to you on the radio on his way home. He says he's a little less homesick now that he can rock out with you. That's fantastic. Penny Lane. Exactly, Penny. Yeah, Kate Hudson's character, Penny Lane, the leader of the Band-Aids. To prepare for the role in Almost Famous, Kate Hudson read Pamela DeBar's book, I'm With the Band. There's actually photos of them together. Cameron Crowe denies that he based the character on Pamela DeBar, but there's a lot of similarities there. So I'm not going to get into he said, she said, whatever. But she has got some insane stories, and just having the ability to kind of sit down and talk to her. Her table was like 2 tables over from mine at the convention. So we were able to talk and stuff. And like, here's a perfect example. So the convention got done and everybody's packing up their stuff. And then we were all kind of milling about the lobby and just kind of hanging out, networking. Everybody was talking and Pamela wasn't around anywhere. Come to find out, she had gone to her hotel room to take a nap. And then she was calling everybody from the network because she was like, where are you guys going to have dinner? I want to come meet you for dinner. So she walks in, not in this dress, but in a different dress than she had worn all day. She had this really cool, funky dress on. And everybody at the table was like, wow, that dress is really cool. And she was like, oh, thanks. It's a vintage Bob Mackie dress. He gave it to me back in, like, Bob Mackie, for any of the guys that are here in the war room, is a very famous fashion designer. And like, she wasn't even trying to like drop names. It's just Bob Mackie gave her the dress. And she was like, oh, thank you for loving the dress, Bob. It's a Bob Mackie vintage dress that he gave me. It was like back in the 70s or something. You can hear a lot of her stories, and she interviews a lot of her friends on her podcast. So if you guys want to check that out, get her on the podcast. Ash, I'm trying to, actually. And it's something that a lot of the people on the Pantheon Network do, is they kind of interview each other. But I would love to get her on the podcast, and there's a good chance that it's going to happen because we really hit it off at the convention. I moderated this panel, so it wasn't so much about me answering the questions as it was about asking these 3 different women, a studio executive, a performer, and a writer and rock and roll icon, all of different eras, kind of what their lives were like coming up in the business. And so it was a really interesting panel, and I want to give a shout out to Rockin' Pod because they really made sure that there was representation for the women in rock at the convention. And I thought that was really cool. And I was honored to be the one to moderate it. So thank you to Rockin' Pod. So that was most of my weekend. Before I left, I went and visited a friend of mine and his wife and their kids that live down in Nashville now. They met here in Boston because his wife used to be the receptionist at WAAF, and he was coming in because we had a meeting about his band. And it's Jay Sims, the lead singer of the band Rubicon. You guys have heard me talk about in the past. He lives in Nashville, and he was coming into a meeting at the radio station. This was probably 12 or 13 years ago now. And I kept him waiting. And while I was in my office working on whatever I was working on, he was hitting on the receptionist. And they've now been married for like 12 years. And they live down in the Nashville area. So I went and had brunch with them and got to see the kids, who I haven't seen since they were babies. And it was really cool. Then I got stuck in insane amounts of traffic because of the Grand Prix race, because the roads all got blocked off and I missed my flight. So I didn't get to bed until about 4:30 Monday morning, and then got up yesterday morning. So if you were listening to me on the radio or you listened to the sit rep yesterday, my voice was a little rough, and it was because I got in so late. But Nashville was awesome. I loved it. I had an absolute blast. I understand why they call it the Music City. It is so apparent driving around that city what regard that city has for its live music venues, which is so refreshing considering that's not the norm in a lot of other places. It was really cool. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan says he loves my questions. Thank you. So it was a really great trip. And like I said, the Billy Sheehan interview is going to be a bonus episode of the podcast, I think, coming up at some point this week. Speaking of the podcast, last week's episode 61, is one of the only times we've had somebody in the podcast twice. Amy Lee from Evanescence is the only other one that's been on the podcast twice. Kevin Martin from Candlebox was on episode 61. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on the podcast, especially when we get into music news, you'll understand why, is I wanted Kevin, because Candlebox is basically his band and he is the logistics brains behind it. I wanted Kevin talking about the business decisions that go into bands going on the road right now because of COVID. The pressures, the insurance concerns, the liability stuff, the expenses. And I really wanted to have somebody talk about that because it is so top of mind right now. Depending on where you are in the US, COVID is different in a lot of places. The federal government just sent hundreds of ventilators to Florida. The governor of Texas is asking for out-of-state help because the ICUs in the hospitals are overrun with COVID patients. The vaccination rates, the debate over vaccinations, like all of this that's going on as we're trying to recover from the shutdown and bands are trying to get out on the road. There are a lot of business variables that I don't think the average concert goer understands. The business liabilities and the risks that artists are taking by doing things like meet and greets, where normally they wouldn't even think twice about it. But now, if a band member or a crew member gets COVID, it pulls the whole tour off the road, and all of the expenses that get incurred by that the hotel rooms, the quarantining, the canceling of dates. There's a lot of stuff that I don't think people think about. And when the protests were happening with Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters at Madison Square Garden about requiring vaccination cards, and people were freaking out saying, this is ridiculous that you're requiring, it's discrimination against unvaccinated people or whatever. It's not like the bands are just waking up saying, okay, well, we want to discriminate against our fan base that isn't vaccinated. It's because of the insurance concerns, the liability. If somebody on their crew gets COVID and dies, or if someone in the venue or whatever, like, these people's livelihoods could be wiped away by stuff like that. And so, it's not meant to be a political debate. I wanted to hear from someone that would speak on the business side of things. And Kevin has been managing the business side of things for Candlebox for decades. So I thought it was really interesting. I love Kevin. He's very candid. We've known each other a long time. He speaks his mind. I really love having people on the podcast that are not unapologetic, but I guess, unapologetic, but not speaking their minds to be controversial, not trying to stir the pot, but just speaking their truth. I think in today's day and age, there is definitely a difference. I think there's a lot of people that are trying to get famous or go viral by saying outrageous things and taking stances on things. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone that I know I can ask him pretty much anything, and he's going to answer the question, and he's going to be truthful. And this week's episode is a lot like that as well. So I hope you guys loved episode 61. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's available everywhere that you listen to your podcast. But Kevin Martin from Candlebox, they also have their tour out on the road right now. And he did say in the podcast episode that if they don't come through in the fall to wherever you live, including in the Northeast, that they are going to be having another leg of the tour coming through in the spring. And so I was happy to hear that, because there weren't any dates. Although there are the dates in early November in their hometown of Seattle, and they're getting together with the original lineup of Candlebox, which is something I really want to see. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to be able to go to Seattle. Joe says that's why bands are delaying the start of their tours almost a year. Joe, it's exactly right. That's why people like Taylor Momsen have just come out and said, we're not touring this year. Not only that, but they had been off the road since long before COVID, and that they wanted to have enough time to rehearse to really make the live show, especially incorporating all the new music, sound good and be right. And Kevin Martin in last week's episode of the podcast brought up Buckcherry, who's out on the road. And then two of the guys in the band tested positive for COVID, and they had to quarantine and pull the tour down for 2 weeks. So there's a lot of risk there. And the bands that are touring right now, a lot of them are doing it because they know their fans are looking for some kind of distraction. Other bands are doing it because they need to make money, because they need to survive. And Elsa says, my job is closed because of COVID. Heidi says, I need to go to Jumptown. Yeah, absolutely. So do I, as a matter of fact. So that was last week's podcast episode. This week's podcast episode, I was so excited when I found out it was definitely happening. Episode 62 of the Mistress Carrie podcast features the one and only Dee Snider. He is, of course, the lead singer of Twisted Sister. He just released his 5th solo record. He is a published author, a radio host. He is an actor. He is a political activist. He's a husband, a father, an entrepreneur. There are so many things to describe Dee Snider. It's insane. And we talked about a lot of stuff. I didn't get him for as long as I get some of the other people. So this episode is definitely not as long as some of the other episodes have been. But we had a great conversation. We talked about political stuff a little bit, just about when he testified in front of the Senate. We talked about some of the stuff that's going on now. Obviously, we recorded this episode of the podcast before he tested positive for COVID. Just a few days after we recorded it, he came out and said that he tested positive for COVID and is fine. He's vaccinated and had minor symptoms or whatever. But there's a reason why I didn't reference that in the podcast, and it's because it hadn't happened yet. So that's why you're not going to hear about his positive test results in the podcast episode, because it happened after. But we had a great conversation about his marriage, about marriage advice. We talked about his new album. We talked about Twisted Sister. He's another guy like Kevin Martin that is incredibly open, honest, candid, forthcoming. And you just know that whatever he says is truly how he feels. That he's not trying to be irreverent. He's not trying to be outrageous. He's not trying to go viral. He just talks about what he thinks, and he answers questions. So when you ask him something, he gives you the answer. Ryan says, wow, D is the man. He was really cool. I actually wanted to talk to him longer because he's a fascinating guy. He's really interesting, and it takes a lot of coffee. And that'll be referenced in this week's episode to be able to keep up with him. We were comparing coffee mug sizes when we were talking to each other because he is one of those guys that's like on 9.5 all the time. And I made sure that before the interview, I was properly caffeinated, which I'm doing again right now. This should be illegal, by the way. PBR, hard coffee. It's so good. I can't even deal. So I'm super excited for you guys to check out this week's episode. And if you subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast, not only do you get the full length episodes that come out every Wednesday, but you also get the situation report. It is amazing to me. And I want to thank everybody that listens to the sit rep every day. I am watching the sit rep become more popular. It's something that I launched back in October. The podcast launched last June. So the podcast has been, it's 62 episodes, so it's been 62 weeks because I haven't missed a week yet. But the sit rep launched in October of last year, and it's my way of breaking down all of your rock news, music headlines, entertainment info. But the weekly episodes of the podcast are long. And depending on where you listen to them and how you listen to them, sometimes they're 45 minutes long, sometimes they're 30 minutes long, sometimes they're 3 hours long. It just depends on the interview. And I wanted to be able to give you guys a feature of the podcast that you were going to be able to get filled in with everything you needed to know, but super fast. And that's what the sit rep is. And I'm just watching the audience of the sit rep grow. And I'm so grateful because I know that you guys want to know what's going on. You're passionate rock fans. And I want to be able to boil it down for you so that you know, hey, this is what's going on. Here you go. So if you subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast, you also get the situation reports every weekday. Here's just a small sampling of where you can subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast. You guys may also notice, and I would like you to give me some feedback on this. My podcast has been added to my Facebook page. So you should be able to access and play my podcast, not because I'm posting the links, but because it's actually a feature on the page now that Facebook is rolling out this feature that podcasters can incorporate their podcast onto their Facebook pages. So, with the hiccups. So if you guys are listening to the podcast on Facebook, let me know. And let me know if you're looking at the Mistress Carrie Facebook page, where you're seeing it. Because obviously it looks different on my end than it's going to look on your end. So they won't keep you up all night, Jen says. These won't keep me up all night. I mean, I feel like this is like the equivalent of a speedball, that you've got booze that's going to make you drowsy and mellow you out with coffee that's going to wake you up. It's like a Jaeger bomb. But they're really good. So there you go. So that's just some of the places. You can always go to mistresscarrie.com if you don't subscribe to any of these podcast outlets, and you can listen to the episodes right off the website as well. And let's see. This man is smoother than a newborn's behind. Who is Brianna? D. Snyder? He is smooth. Let's see. Very little caffeine in those, Ryan said. Okay. And we are holding steady at 114 countries that are represented on the Mistress Carrie podcast that have been accessing the podcast. Canada is once again number 2. There seems to be this battle between Canada and the UK as to who the number 2 country is behind the United States that's listening to the podcast. So what's up to everybody, our neighbors to the north? Thank you to all of the Canadians that are listening to the podcast. Even though I don't have Canadian bands on every week, although I have had Canadian bands on in the past. All right, let's talk about some music headlines because there's a lot going on. Motorhead's graphic novel comes out on September 7th. It is all about Lemmy's childhood. It's a graphic novel, so that means comic, and it goes all the way up through the recording and the release of Ace of Spades. The Led Zeppelin documentary is coming out this fall. There's no release date yet. It's called Becoming Led Zeppelin. It is the first fully authorized by the band documentary about Led Zeppelin. When I told you guys about bringing on new artists onto the podcast, that I wanted the Mistress Carrie podcast to not only be a place where I could keep you in touch with the artists that I know you already love, but I wanted the Mistress Carrie podcast to also be a place that you guys knew you could come to and get introduced to some new music as well. And that's happening because this week, All Good Things hit number 1. And you guys heard from Dan Murphy from All Good Things just a couple weeks ago here on the podcast. And this week they hit number 1 on the rock charts, which is unbelievable. And it's not the first time. Aaron Jones did the same thing. And I'm not saying it's because they were on the Mistress Carrie podcast, but what I'm saying is we're starting to develop quite the track record for having up and coming artists that are really breaking through on the podcast. And it's because you guys are interested. You guys want to hear from these new artists. We can have Dee Snider from Twisted Sister on here. We can talk to Kevin Martin from Candlebox, but you're also hearing from these new artists. And so I wanted to congratulate Dan Murphy and all of the members of All Good Things because their debut album isn't even out until August 20th. And they have their first number 1 song, which is unbelievable. So I'm super psyched for them. And yeah, it's freaking badass. Good evening, Anita. I always spread the word on the new artists, Hines says. Yeah. And, you know, I know that they appreciate it. And because there isn't a rock station in Massachusetts, really, like, I mean, what AAF used to do to be able to help break new artists, there isn't a station that is doing that. And I don't think we're going to get one. And so there needs to be another way that these artists are going to find audience in the Northeast and create a foothold for themselves so that when they come through town, there's people that know who they are and go to see these shows. And I'm just super psyched because this is the kind of stuff that you guys help to make happen. And when I tell you guys about a new band, you may not like every one of them. But what I love about you guys is that you'll at least give them a chance. You'll listen to the music and the playlists. You will listen to the podcast. Even if I'm interviewing somebody you've never heard of before, you probably didn't know who Dan Murphy was from All Good Things before, but you give them a chance. You give these bands an opportunity to win you over. And yeah, you guys are just fucking awesome. I was so excited when I saw the news about All Good Things today. I could not wait to come in the warm to tell you guys about it. So way to go, guys. Cheers to you. All right. More music news. Just a reminder, Nikki Sixx's new book comes out on October 19th. I believe it's available for pre-order. It's called The First 21. It's about the first 21 years of his life before he made it to LA to start Motley Crue. Iron Maiden's new album, Senjutsu, is coming out on September 3rd. The first single is out now. It's called The Writing on the Wall. Brian Johnson from AC/DC's autobiography, The Lives of Brian, comes out on October 26th. That goes through his upbringing all the way through the recording process and the release of Back in Black. And I'm really looking forward to this one. I think I love reading rock star autobiographies anyway. And I think Nikki Sixx's book is going to be really interesting. But I also, because Brian Johnson is older and the pressure of coming into a situation following the death of Bon Scott and then triumphing against all odds. Is that a word, triumphing? And releasing the biggest album of AC/DC's career, Back in Black. I just think that's going to be a fascinating story to hear his perspective on it. Don't forget the Ronnie James Dio autobiography, Rainbow in the Dark, is already out. It came out last week. So if you haven't checked that out, I believe it's even available on like Audible and stuff. So you want to check that out as well. Shinedown, attention, attention. The film is coming to video on demand outlets on September 3rd. Daughtry, here's another artist. You heard him on the Mistress Carrie podcast talking about how he's an independent artist now. He got a record deal after he was on American Idol, even though he didn't win. But that deal has been severed. He's now an independent artist. And his new single just cracked the top 10 on the rock charts. And he talked in the podcast episode that he was on about how this is the first record where from soup to nuts, it's his vision, it's his wishes, everything from the artwork to writing the songs to producing the songs the way that he wanted them to. And so Daughtry is climbing up the charts too, which is amazing. Tom Morello's solo album, The Atlas Underground Fire, comes out on October 15th. Speaking of AC/DC, he released a cover of Highway to Hell. He obviously playing guitar, Eddie Vedder and Bruce Springsteen singing on that version of Highway to Hell. If you haven't heard it yet, it's pretty interesting. And speaking of, oh, there's a typo. Speaking of Bruce Springsteen, it's Jessica Springsteen, not Jessix. So Social, if you're new to the War Room, when there's a typo on the screen, you got to drink. So Jessica Springsteen, congratulations to her. She was a first-time Olympian, and she just won a silver medal in the team equestrian event in Tokyo at the Olympic Games. So a proud papa Bruce Springsteen must be, because his daughter just won a silver medal representing the United States, which is pretty cool. All right, let's see. What else? There's new Tesla coming out at the end of the month called Cold Blue Steel. It's coming out on August 27th. Speaking of Tesla, and this is the stuff that I was talking about with regards to Kevin Martin from Candlebox. Frank Hannon from Tesla tested positive for COVID-19. And, the tour. I missed the T. Shit, I didn't do that on purpose. I swear to God. The tour has been postponed with Tesla because they had another guitar player come in and sit in for a couple weeks. Frank Hannon was pretty ill. So now Tesla's tour is postponed. Sebastian Bach tested positive for COVID, as did Ricky Metlock from Lynyrd Skynyrd. And Tesla was supposed to play shows with Lynyrd Skynyrd, but Gary Rossington, the only remaining original member from Lynyrd Skynyrd, had to have emergency heart surgery. And now Ricky Medlock has COVID, so Lynyrd Skynyrd has postponed their tour as well. Fall Out Boy had to pull off of the Hella Mega Tour at Fenway because they got exposed to COVID and had to go into quarantine. I don't believe it was anybody in the band, but somebody in the Fall Out Boy organization tested positive. So they had to come off of that big sold out stadium tour with Weezer and Green Day. Speaking of COVID, Limp Bizkit and Stevie Nicks both announced today they are postponing the rest of their tours because of COVID as well. So there's a lot going on with tours and with music right now. And it goes back to everything we were talking about in last week's episode of the podcast with Kevin Martin from Candlebox. It's huge liability. It is a gamble for artists to go out on the road right now. If you're able to do it healthy, stay healthy, have nobody test positive, people want to go and see shows, and you can make money and you can keep your band afloat and feed your family. But it is a gamble that if somebody tests positive and you get exposed, that you've got to quarantine the tour for at least 10 days And that's going to happen at your own expense. And getting these shows postponed is a logistical nightmare. So that is another typo. Yeah, I know, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, we got to talk about this. So I want to remind you guys about the Boston Wounded Vet Run. That is coming up on September 19th. I am going to have a booth at the finish of the Boston Wounded Vet Run at Anthony's of Malden. It's the biggest motorcycle ride of the year in Massachusetts, I believe. And it's like 5,000, 6,000 bikes. And it starts at Boston Harley, and it's happening on September 19th. You do not have to ride a motorcycle to come to the after party or anything like that. But what they do is they select wounded veterans that are in need of very specific things. And those veterans actually go and make speeches at the Wounded Vet Run. There's usually guest speakers, other veterans, amazing stories, music, vendors. It's always a good time. So that's happening on September 19th. I wanted to let you guys know we have a very big announcement on episode 145. So next Tuesday, I've got a very big announcement about an event that I want to tell you guys about. So that's happening next week. I also want to let you guys know tickets are still available to go see Kiss on August 18th at the Xfinity Center, Korn and Stained at the Xfinity Center. Does that say Stains? God damn it. Sorry for the typo, Stained. Korn and Stained at the Xfinity Center. Hold on, let me fix that. Korn and Stained at the Xfinity Center on August 21st. And there's still tickets available to see Kings of Leon at the Xfinity Center on August 27th. So if you want to go and see some of those shows, all of the tickets are available through Ticketmaster. And there are more details, as always, on the events calendar at mistresscarrie.com. Charity events I wanted to remind you guys about that are coming up in the coming weeks. The 7th annual Salute Our Veterans motorcycle ride for Project New Hope, and also the Devon's Dog and Music Festival at Clear Path for Veterans New England. These are... God, the show is a mess tonight. Jesus. Those are both happening in the coming weeks, and details on both of those events are also available on the events calendar at mistresscarrie.com. Mail call tonight. Guys, it's been a little rough. I did not get to the post office. I'm really sorry. It's been a day. I did want to tell you guys I started physical therapy this morning. So because I had pretty extensive back surgery as a kid, and then did the Tough Ruck 4 years in a row, which was not exactly the smartest thing to do when you're somebody that's had pretty severe and intrusive back surgery. Back right around the time Metallica headlined Gillette Stadium in 2017, my back was really bothering me. And I ended up going to physical therapy for it for a while. Felt so good. Obviously, I ran the Boston Marathon in 2019. But I haven't talked about it much, but I've been dealing with some pretty extensive and severe back pain probably over the last 6 months. And I started back to physical therapy this morning. So there was a lot of running around this morning. My back actually feels pretty good today. But I was not able to go and check the mail. So we'll just talk about what I got in the mail last week, which is this PBR hard coffee that I can't stop drinking now. Corn stains. Oh my God, Keith, I know. What happens when you get relieved early from the radio due to the Wysocks? Well, Keith, that's not the only show that I do. So I'm also on the air for Westwood One as well. So if I get preempted by the Wysocks on the Pike, I'm still doing the rest of my job. So I ain't going anywhere. Whoever invented spell check needs to go to hello. I know, Ryan. Okay. I'm sorry. I was rushing. It's been a day and I'm still tired from Nashville. So the show's a mess tonight. You're welcome for all the drinking. You guys are going to be wasted trying to get up for work tomorrow. William says you need another PBR. No, I don't. You can't chug this stuff. I just finished the can. I'm just going to have the one, but it's delicious. I am a huge fan. Jonathan, I couldn't agree with you more. I need an intern. turmeric, turmeric, turmeric. One for the dictionary. Corn stains. That's going in the dictionary. Absolutely. Spell check was written by an evil engineer. Yeah. I'll put those up in the dictionary when we get done with the show tonight. Okay. I want to let you guys know about a sale on the website. So I love these onesies. I brought a bunch of them down to Rockin' Pod, and I actually had a marketing company come over and compliment me on these onesies. But the time for babies to have been made in 2020 and born is coming close to an end. I mean, 9 to 10 months gestation, we're running out of time. So we're having a sale while supplies last on the Maiden Lockdown 2020 onesies. You get 20% off of the onesies for the next week if you use the code LOCKDOWN20 when you check out. Now, people that have a Backstage Pass holders always every month get coupon codes for discounted merchandise anyway. This is for everybody. This code is for everybody. And Backstage Pass holders can also use this code in conjunction with whatever other discount codes Backstage Pass holders have. So if you want to get these onesies, get them while supplies last, because once they're gone, they are gone. So go to mistresscarrie.com, check out the store, and 20% for the next week off of the Maiden Lockdown 2020 onesies. Let's talk about some birthdays. First of all, anybody here in the War Room celebrating a birthday today? Happy birthday to you. And Jen, thank you for sticking up for me. Give the girl a ton of credit. She does more in one day than most of us. I'm a pretty busy girl, Jen, but you know what? You guys have seen me with no job and talking into my phone to most of you. And you guys have seen me with many jobs, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm not complaining. I know, Jonathan, I got to put the pug hole in there too. They fit my daughter like a glove. She cries in the BTI onesies. Oh, Josh Dolan, everybody. I'm glad she likes my onesie. All right. So if today's your birthday, Leo Fender, yes, like as in Fender guitars. Yeah, he was born on this date. Eddie Fisher was born on this date. Bobby Hatfield was born on this date. Ian Anderson and Ronnie Spector were all born on this date. So you share it with some pretty heavy hitters when it comes to rock and roll royalty. So, what's up, Sabrina? How are you? Welcome to the War Room. Birthday right here. Pam, happy birthday. Happy unbirthday, Keith. Let's see. My birthday is 2 weeks from today. Well, Mark, we will have a birthday for you on episode 146 in 2 weeks. It's still not my birthday, Keith says. I know. I remember the phone. You have come a long way, says Kathy. Yeah, we've come a long way together. The War Room has come a long way together. And I can't wait for the announcement I have for you guys next week. So make sure you're listening for that. So those are all the birthdays. And I mentioned the Mistress Carrie Backstage Passes. Here's just a little detail on that. Backstage Passes, you get them on Patreon. You get an exclusive live stream every month with me. You can submit podcast interview submissions. The people with the Backstage Passes know a lot more of the behind the scenes stuff. They know who's going to be on the podcast before anybody else. They also get discount codes on stuff. This month, they get 20% off the entire store all month long. They get exclusive concert ticket giveaways, and they get early access to events. When we start having events, they're going to get early access to tickets as well. And that's just some of the things. Plus you get, pictures, stories, blogs, all that stuff. So if you want to get a Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass, you can get it at patreon.com/Mistress Carrie, or just click the Patreon link on the Mistress Carrie website. And that's just some of the places you can find me. So there's all the handles: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Cameo, YouTube, Patreon, and of course, mistresscarrie.com, where you can find links to absolutely everything. Happy unbirthday, Keith says. Penny, when is your birthday? My birthday is on the events calendar at mistresscarrie.com, as is Wednesdays. Mine's October 1st. So it's coming up. You know what's crazy, guys? Here's what's nuts. Next week is my engagement anniversary. Remember a year ago when I came in the war room and was like, guess what? Yeah, my wedding anniversary is coming up at the end of the month. What? It's crazy. Yeah, we got engaged and got married 2 weeks later. Shotgun wedding, kind of. Not really. I just can't believe that it's been almost a year. It's insane to me that it's been almost a year since I got engaged. I can't believe it's been almost a year since I got married. It feels like it was yesterday, although my husband's been deployed for most of it. So we haven't been able to get on each other's nerves. People are like, oh, the honeymoon's almost over. The first year's the honeymoon. He's been gone. So if they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, then my marriage is going to last forever because he's not here. Let's see. I know. Isn't it crazy? The hubby is good, Penny. Thank you for asking. There's a chance that I might see him for like a day or two in like the next month. He's been doing some traveling. And so if there's an opportunity for me to see him, I'm going to take it. So is he coming home soon? Christina wants to know. I believe March, April, something like that. We're not really sure exactly when yet, but something like that. So no, he's not coming home. He's not coming home this year, other than passing through on business or whatever. But no, he's not coming home until after the new year. So is mine, August 25th. It will be 26 years, says Michelle. That's amazing. Yeah, it seems like yesterday. Like, we have been getting together so often now that we're starting to hit anniversaries of things. I mean, the anniversary of the podcast was back in June. We already had the anniversary of WAF come and gone. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's going to be 2 years in February. It's blowing my mind, the things that we have been through together in 144 episodes of The War Room. It shocks me how much time we have spent together, not just on Tuesday nights, but riding out the height of COVID the first time. And I'm so grateful that you guys have been on this ride with me. It's crazy. And when I was talking to people, like at the podcast convention, you guys can see in the pictures, like the pictures, me and Billy Sheehan or me and John Wysocki, the banners that are behind me say Cocktails in the War Room, and then they say Mistress Carrie, and it's got the website. So people were coming up and they were saying, is that the name of your podcast, Cocktails in the War Room? And I was like, no, that's my video show. The podcast is just the Mistress Carrie podcast. And they were like, well, what's the video show about? And I found myself trying to explain it. And I was like, well, it's this thing we do on Tuesday nights, and we get together and we talk about music and talk about current events. And people were like, oh, that's really cool. Like, but I couldn't. And they said, well, how long have you been doing it? I'm like, 144 episodes this week. And they were like, what? It just blows my mind. Blows my mind. So a lot of water under the bridge, Michael says. Exactly. Time flies when you're having fun, says Heidi. I've never been married, but my sister has been for close to 50 years. Carlo, that's pretty insane. Close to 50 years is... At the beginning, it was every day. Yeah, the first 80 episodes were every day. So it hasn't been 144 weeks. But it's still been every week since episode 81. That was back in June. It's crazy. Of last year, June of last year. Going to celebrate 22 years on August 29th. Kim, congratulations. It's been forever and a blink of an eye at the same time. You know what, Donna? That's exactly the perfect description. It has dragged at some points, right? It seemed like it was never going to end. And then it seems like Brianna say, our family is 512 days old today. 512 days since the first episode of Cocktails in the War Room. That's insane to me. Shockingly insane that it's been 512 days. Brianna, thank you for doing the math because you know how much it hurts my head. We get drunk on Facebook. You know what, Jonathan? That's what I should have said. What's Cocktails in the War Room? Every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern, I get drunk on Facebook. And on my YouTube channel because you can find the episodes there after the fact too. William says, y'all up there is my second home. I feel at home here. You should, William. This is like how we work things out. We solve problems. We brainstorm. We laugh. Sometimes we cry. I haven't cried on the show in a while, which I'm kind of happy about. You guys have seen me cry enough. I've been back here in Barnhart, Texas for over 12 years now, says William. Ash says the best family to have gained. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I look back at that first episode of the War Room. It wasn't even a thing. It was just like a 12-minute, hey, I'm going to go live and say hi to you guys and let you guys know I'm okay. And we should do something for 666 days. You guys are going to have to keep track of that. Can you guys keep track of day 666 for me, please? Somebody figure out when it's going to be so we can put it on the calendar because I'm A, not smart enough, and B, my brain is just, it's been a long day. I just imagine if Carrie, I did an episode together in the War Room. Good riddance, says Travis. What happened? Ryan says, hey, Carrie, I love the show. Thank you. Let's see. Well, it wasn't too bad. Dunks delivered during quarantine. It could have been worse. Yeah, I mean, when you go back and think about everything that's gone on, the uncertainty, the economic stuff, the illness part, not being even able to have like funerals and services for family members. I'm not saying it's great now, but it's a lot better, at least where we are, than it has been. Although other parts of the country right now are suffering so bad. They're starting to put up tents around hospitals, things that other regions of the country withstood last time around, last year at the beginning before the vaccines. And no one could have predicted that these variants, the debates over the vaccines, just all of it, it's been insane. And I'm exhausted from the battles of it. I feel like I'm tired of battling with other people. We're supposed to all be focused in battle against the virus, you know, like Independence Day, when all the nations came together to fight the evil aliens, and Jeff Goldblum smoked that cigar and had that swagger walking down the jetway after he saved the world with his nerdy computer virus. But I digress. You guys know how much I love me some Jeff Goldblum. But it's sad that I just wish that we would just fight the evil thing and not each other. I just want it to be over. It's amazing to me how much shit I've taken too because I got vaccinated online. Put a picture up of me getting vaccinated and people were like, "Rrr." It's like, okay, well, if you don't want to get it, there's no reason for you to lash out at me over it. It's not your body, not your problem. But Heidi says here it's bad. Sunday, January 9th is 666 days of the War Room family. Holy shit. That's crazy. What's scary is that they said this may never go away. Well, I mean, it takes a lot to eradicate something, right? I mean, look at the concerted effort to eradicate things like polio and measles and mumps, all of which are making a resurgence now because people are opting not to get vaccinated. And a lot of those things in other parts of the world never went away. But we just take for granted that when you're a kid, you get the MMR vaccine and you don't have to worry about it. I mean, hell, there's a vaccine for the chicken pox. Didn't have that when I was a kid. Country fairs and concerts are getting blamed for high cases of COVID-19. Yeah. I mean, last year, Sturgis, they said something like 250,000 cases of COVID could be traced back to Sturgis last year in the height of it. And Sturgis is happening right now. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. We got to buckle up because there's a lot that's going to happen over the next couple months, I think. Only 2 pandemics have ever been eradicated, and it was in this month's National Geographic. I'm going to have to check that out, Trina. Thanks for the heads up. You need Jeff Goldblum and John Bon Jovi on the podcast, Donna says. Yeah, I need both of them in my life. I would like them both sitting next to me on this green couch here in the War Room. But I'll take the podcast. That way they could be at a safe distance, so there wouldn't be any unwanted groping or fondling on my part. Let's see. Yeah, see, guys, now you guys are starting to bicker back and forth about being guinea pigs and like all that stuff. It's like, it's exhausting. The FDA, from what they're saying, a lot of people have been saying that the FDA hasn't approved the vaccine, and that's what they're waiting for. And I saw in the news that the FDA is going to approve the vaccine in the next couple of weeks, most likely. So we'll see what happens with that. Smallpox, which we hope never comes back, hopefully. Let's see. We're going to have to go live on January 9th. I know we might have to do something. That's pretty hilarious. Shame on Harley Davidson for sponsoring Sturgis. I mean, look, it's... there's a lot of tours out right now that are sponsored. I mean, the concerts we're talking about happening at the Xfinity Center are all sponsored. There isn't a right answer right now. That's the fucking problem. There's just no right answer. And I understand that, I mean, the whole economy of that region of the country is propped up by Sturgis for the entire year, which I understand when they make decisions about having something like Sturgis is that it literally props up the economy for the entire year around there. There are some places that make all of their money in that 2 weeks or 3 week span around Sturgis, and that sustains them all year long. That this is the problem, is that it's exhausting to bicker about it. And it's like, I would just rather use the energy to just fucking figuring it out. But it's just so tiring. Trina says, did you get the Stevie Nicks pic that I sent you in the email? Trina, I totally did. And it was awesome. I love her. It's mentally draining, says Heine. Yeah. For me and my students, we will be masked, says Kathy. Yeah, I mean, kids are going back to school now. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of factors here. And, I'm a stats person. I like to base things on logic and reason and facts. And right now, there's 2 maps. There's a map of vaccination rates, and there's a map of infection rates and hospitalization rates. And right now, while cases are going up around the country because of the Delta variant, hospitalizations and deaths are happening in shocking rates in certain parts of the country. Look, am I going to sprout a third nipple in the middle of my fucking forehead because I got vaccinated? I don't know the answer to that question. I also don't know what all the ingredients were in my lunch. So for me, with all the other vaccines, I got 14 vaccines to go to Afghanistan and Iraq. 14. Never mind the malaria medication that made me trip my balls off while I was on the air for 2 weeks before I even left. Pixelating my vision. I don't know what was in that stuff. I don't even know if the goat I ate in Afghanistan was even fully cooked. I have no idea. And I sure as hell know what was burned in the burn pits, though, because I was around a lot of those. So my body is definitely not a fucking temple. So I got the shot. That's how I looked at it. But the decision, I guess, is up to you on what you want to do. And by the way, all those shots that I got before I went to Iraq, I got them done on live television. I sat there and they were like 1, 2, 3, 4 on live TV because they sent the press with me to go to the travel clinic to get them all. And I had a vaccine passport that I had to travel with because of the countries I was going through to prove that I got all the vaccinations that were required for travel. So all of the people talking about, well, I'm not going to carry documentation about vaccines. Well, I had to go overseas. So I don't know I can't even pronounce half the shots I got when I went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Don't even know what was in them. Was it really goat? Trina, I don't know the answer to that question. I was in Afghanistan. It was meat. I looked at it. None of it was pink. I was like, okay, I'm eating it. Everybody else was eating it. I just ate it. I don't know what it was. I'm assuming it was goat, but I don't know. I would love a woman with a third nipple, says Keith. So I don't know, guys. We don't have the answers here in the war room. We just kind of talk about whatever the hell is going on and try not to judge each other for our decisions. That's all we can do, is just try to be a place where we can go to try and escape the crazy, because there's a lot of crazy, and to just be a support system and a bunch of people that have one thing in common, and that's the love of the music that is the soundtrack to all of our lives. And it's something that we all love. It's something that we all love to be around. It's something that we like to go and see live, and we like to be around other misfit toys in this land that we've kind of all created. So, this is all we can do. Do you have contact with the person who has your tattoo on him? There's a few people that have tattoos on them, Jonathan. I think there's 3 or 4, I think. I see them every now and again, but yeah. They eat lots of goat in Mexico too. I mean, look, I love goats. I think they're adorable, especially the ones that are on the internet in pajamas, hopping up and down on bales of hay. But when you're in Afghanistan and there's goat, you just kind of eat the goat. So I ate the goat and the MREs too. I don't know what was in those either. Let's see. I have 3 titties, says Heidi. Well, there you go. Anything is possible in the war room. All right, guys, I got to get ready to get out of here. Do not forget, episode 62 of the Mistress Carrie podcast features the one and only Dee Snider. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Later on in the week, you're going to get the bonus episode of my conversation with Billy Sheehan that I recorded down at the convention in Nashville over the weekend. So be listening for that, because he has some really cool stuff to say as well. And next week, here, 8:30 Eastern, big announcement. Can't wait to tell you all about it. Cheers to you guys. Thank you for 144 episodes of getting together with this crazy ass family. And thank you for always being so supportive, not only of me, but for all of the artists as well. I was really, really touched to see All Good Things hit #1 today. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to talk to you guys about it. So cheers to you guys. I love you guys. Deep breath. And thanks to PBR and your hard coffee, because it's delicious. I don't know where Wednesday is, so I'll just say goodnight for her too. Good night, guys. I'll see you next week.